if you want to see rooftop tents on Tacomas, go to Overland Expo. If you want to see Jeeps, just go to Toledo Jeep Fest or Easter Jeep Safari. And it's like nothing but the straight. Yeah. It's like if you're going to do cocaine, just do it straight. Don't cut it.
Welcome to the Off the Road Again podcast. I'm Chris.
I'm Ross.
And I'm Dan.
This is our podcast about anything and everything off-road. Tonight, we're more back in our wheelhouse of kind of off-road overlandy. We're still socially distant. We're much closer than the last time we spoke. Ross is in the Northeast. I'm in the Midwest, and Dan's on the west side of Canada.
That's right. Yeah, I'm in British Columbia.
Perfect. Yeah, way closer than Australia was last time. So,
and way colder too, I'll add.
Yeah, way colder. I think last time we had you when you were still in your hotel quarantine for arriving in country down there.
That's right. Yep.
Yep. Is this possibly the first time that we have spoken when we're all in the same hemisphere?
That could be.
I'm not sure where you were the first
time.
Was I in Africa? I can't even remember myself.
It was.
I want to say you were back this side, but I'm not sure.
Either during or at the end of the Africa adventure. So either way, welcome back to the Western Hemisphere. Welcome back to the cold.
The glory of video conferencing. Doesn't matter.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the winter that you're experiencing for the first time in a while. So
yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. Driving, it's something to concentrate on.
When's the last time you thought about snow tires? I saw that video where you pulled the Africa Jeep out of storage and you put not just like all-terrains, but actual winters on it.
Yeah, no, having not driven on the snow for like 2.5 years, I decided that I better go for real winter tires so that when I was sliding into a ditch, I would say, well, I mean, at least I tried.
Yeah. A for effort. Maybe not for execution, but you know.
That's right.
Yeah, it's an entirely different animal.
So
in the ice and the snow, as
Chris knows. My favorite, it snowed here today, which they canceled school, which is just an abomination of horrible because all the roads were clear by like 9:45 in the morning. I was like, we couldn't have done a late start. Like we could have get all these kids out of my house. But
that's not anymore.
Yeah, my favorite snow fact is that the best coefficient of friction on snow is snow.
Correct. Which is why open lug tires do better in and on snow because they pack more snow in and they create more friction.
Dan doesn't believe it.
I feel like I just went like mind equals blown. I'm like, what? I don't. Okay.
That's why something like a Goodyear Duratrack does better than like a KO2 in the snow because it basically over the same surface area holds more snow, packs more snow in, and grips more. I mean, the only thing we can say is that there are studded tires, which throws the conversation out the window. But
that's no longer a coefficient of friction. That's just spikes.
Yes. Yes. It turns out pointy things are really good at grabbing onto other things as ice climbers and ice skaters and all those people know. So
Ross, do you have any updates?
A couple updates. So I spent last week with the Cadillac CT5e Blackwing. And as of this conversation, the review is on Hooniverse. And it is a glorious, glorious machine. I mean, the last CTSV was spectacular. The CTSV before that was spectacular. Like the CTSV has always just kind of been like an M5. If you pull 20 grand worth of fit and finish and material quality out and add 10 of that back in engine. And the Blackwing is exactly that. It is not slow. It is surprisingly agile for something, the size of what's effectively a 5 Series. And it makes some awesome noises. So
yes, it does.
That was a good time. That left and has been replaced by the Land Rover Defender 130, which, as Doug mentioned, is troubling to look at. It's
Not ideal, I think, is the phrase.
The rear hangover behind the rear axle is enormous. Like it has.
Well, yeah, it's a full-size SUV designed to hold more crap. Welcome to suburban land.
Yes, but as we had a conversation about, Suburban wheelbase is stretched versus Tahoe wheelbase. D130 wheelbase is not stretched versus D110 wheelbase. So they just went and just bumped the back out, and it is, the good thing is that it doesn't change anything about the way the Defender acts or drives or behaves in any way, because that is very good. The not so good thing is that you have to look at it. It's a lot of untouched metal back there.
So Dan, Ross put this picture in our Car Guy Hooniverse Slack channel, and everybody was like, "Oh my god, it's so gross!" And I was like, "Guys, it looks totally normal to me. I'm sorry, I don't, because I live in large extended SUV land all the time.
You live in 3-row land.
Yeah, I have to have 3 rows plus cargo. Now, I will argue this isn't long enough. It needs like another foot to get me to where I could then have enough space approaching suburban.
Then you're not looking in Land Rover land. That is not how it goes.
So I didn't even realize this is the new 130. It does not have a 130-inch wheelbase.
It does not.
I had no idea they did that.
What they call the 110-inch wheelbase.
Yeah. I see. So there is no 130, officially, although like kind of like in the old school.
It is a sales proposition, and I mean, as we all know, they'll probably sell every single one of them because it's got it walks the walk and it looks the look.
Yep.
I am not a Land Rover guy. I didn't know they were numbers based on wheelbase.
Genius. Like the Defender 90, the 2-door 90. The 110-inch wheelbase, and then 130-inch wheelbase.
Yep.
Like that was since when was that, 1950, 1960?
So after it came off like Series 2, then they started with the wheelbase based things. So the 130 that's not a 130 still drives like a 110, just with more to deal with on the departure angle.
Right, so there it is. Yeah, that's right. Departure angle of horrible, but otherwise
it's not good. It's like a Gladiator. Sore subject, eh? No, I'm just kidding. So that's my press car update. Other updates, Accessorides was kind enough to send over a remote start kit for the Lexus, which is kind of a sore subject on my side because Lexus did this stupid thing where they incorporated remote start into a 3G service, and then they incorporated their remote start into a 3G service. So when they stopped their 3G service, the remote start ability completely disappeared.
So it was like a subscription model type thing. As long as you paid to continue the 3G, you got to keep your remote start
to a point. And then when they no longer participate in that 3G capability, the remote start capability is completely gone. There is no remote start for the GX460. So Accessorides makes a plug and play kit, and they were kind enough to send it over, and I'm going to hopefully get it installed this Saturday.
You're going to plug and play it.
I'm going to plug and play it, which entails pulling off part of my dashboard, and hopefully the weather is, above 40 degrees. So yes, thank you, Accessorides, in advance. And this is what it looks like.
Oh,
it is.
Does it
wiry dongly thing?
Does it come now? No, you go, Dan.
Sorry, do you know now, is that a 4G remote start, or is it a traditional old remote like we used to have?
It is paired directly to the OEM Lexus key fob. It is not tied into any other service. So
I was like, the Suburban has 4G LTE that I pay for every month.
Yes, you have Wi-Fi. We know.
But it's so my kids can stream stuff and leave me alone for a bit of time. The best is when you drive through dead zones in Montana, and they're like, what are we gonna do? And I'm like, watch the DVD player that's actually in the vehicle. Like, they're so spoiled. Like, it's just disgusting.
See, my kid's streaming service is she looks in the mirror that I have mounted on the headrest, and it basically shows what's coming up on the road in front of her in the opposite direction. So
Old
Yeah,
school.
so that's all my updates. Other than that, Chris and I have started talking about possibly going to Expo East down in, it was Tennessee or Virginia.
It is Arrington, Virginia.
There. So
it is the only expo I did not attend last summer.
All right. So the
Well,
one that you didn't
I
attend is
shouldn't
the one
say
that we're
that.
talking about attending.
The big three are West, Mountain West, and East, right?
Mhm.
Apologies to people in the Pacific Northwest, but I'm leaving PNW off that list. I did so technically I only attended 50% of them last summer because I did West and Mountain West. So I've heard East is a good time as well.
Yep.
Yeah, East is a really good time. I was there in 2019 and it's fun. It's like West used to be maybe 10 years ago, where it's just kind of small and fun and you know everyone by name. It isn't so big that it's, you know, kind of a huge big dog and pony show.
Well, that's good.
Which that was the fun part for me to attend West, is there were so many people that we've had on the show that I've never been around in real life. Like technically Ross and I still haven't been in the same space together. So
This is true.
Which is,
so if this happens,
we're going to
that'll
try
be-
and that would be the time where we actually finally are physically in the same. I can look down on him instead of me looking up at him on the video.
That is hilarious.
But yeah, it was great to see people in real life and just kind of, you know, shake hands with a lot of people you've only really talked to on Instagram before and things like that. So,
or via the podcast. So
yes.
Yeah. And so hopefully the stars align and we can make this happen.
So my update, we alluded to as we were starting to record, has just become, I think shit show's the appropriate term for it. The podcast was invited to go on a rally here at the beginning of April out in Utah. There is a day that was referred to as light rock crawling, and with Ross's GX is probably the most able of all of our vehicles, but for him it's 6 days round trip to drive from Connecticut out to Utah and back.
6 days.
And yeah, if you're really pushing it. And then all of my stuff isn't really armored enough for that kind of travel, and the Suburban's way too big. The Sequoia actually launched a fuel pump over the weekend, so I'm trying to find 100 series again. I had an LX, an 04, 05. I can never remember the year of it. I had an LX 470, which then turned into eventually an 80 series, and now I'd like to get back into 100 series. And I have started looking. The issue is not the available vehicles. The issue is my price point. The price range I'm looking at is like $3,000 to $8,000, and it's just so tight. And anyone you find that is a good candidate is gone in seconds. Like
6 years ago, you could have bought 2 of them for that budget.
Right. And I'd rather have the V8. I've driven the 80 series in the Rocky Mountains, and while it did do everything I needed it to do out there, I don't want to do that again. It was just so slow. Spending your day at 3,000 RPMs is not fun. So trying to get back into 100 series. And that's the joke that I said earlier is like they exist, but they're unicorns. And then Ross, I don't know how to open these images.
Yeah, you're probably better off not. I went on Dolly and typed in Land Cruiser 80 series unicorn, 100 series unicorn, among other things, and it generated eyesores. To say the least of it.
Even the unicorns are. I mean, the one did add a rainbow, which I appreciate, but the other unicorns are just kind of. It's like stuffed animals you see at the fair
that have been on the shelf for like 4 years too long.
Yeah, or the country of origin where they were made has literally no reference of what a unicorn is. So
or isn't a country anymore. Yeah. The funny thing is that I typed in, I think one of them was 80 series and one of them was 100 series, and the first of the 2 images kind of looks like a first gen 4Runner, and the second of the 2 doesn't really look like any Toyota product ever, except for maybe like a 5th gen 4Runner that got
matchbox. With the white ones?
Yeah.
If you'd have told me that was a Soviet product, I'd have been like, okay.
Yes, it is. It is a lot of Niva with 4Runner design cues.
That's exactly what. Yeah, absolutely.
So pro tip: don't dolly any of that.
So the search continues, I would say. I will throw some love to Matt Hardigree at the Autotopian, because so I've just been constantly looking through different listings all over the place. And he wrote a piece today on how Facebook Marketplace is just absolutely ruining his sanity. And I 100% felt everything about his article. Sorry, I was trying to pull it up real fast to share it. He was like, I think Facebook Marketplace is starting to take my sanity. And that is 100% where I have felt, because like it's 100 series. They all have the 4.7 V8, some variety of it, right? And it's either got a 4-speed transmission or a 5-speed, depending on years. But when was the timing belt done? It's the first question everyone's going to ask, because that's all that matters. It's the weakest point of that engine. If you don't know that,
not even that hard to do.
Right. But that's the question that everybody wants to know. And so like, there's one right now that I want to offer nearby. I'll offer. And to be honest, I did offer him an amount of money, but they're way higher. And it's about due for the service. Like it's like 5,000 miles away from having to do for the service. Like,
yeah. And a shop doing it, it's like $1,100 for a shop to do it. And you do it yourself.
I would say pre-inflation numbers, it might't have been 1,100.
Yeah. Okay.
We're probably closer to $2,000 now.
3 years ago when I was working on the 4.7, yeah. $2,000. Oh my God. The parts to do it are like $300.
Right. Well, the fuel pump on the Sequoia was $1,600. So I just, yeah.
The pump in the tank?
Yeah. And you have to drop the tank to do it.
Oh,
there's no catch like there are in so many other vehicles where you just pop out a couple of bolts and you can get to the fuel pump there pretty quick and easy.
The straps okay? Because that's a big Toyota thing too, is the straps that hold the tanks in place tend to rot out, and then the fuel tank starts to sag and it kills the fuel. Yeah.
They went through it, and this dealer is known for doing the while you're in there. So they'll add those on, and they did not mention them at all. So I'm assuming we're okay. I do pretty good job of every time it snows trying to run those things through a car wash real fast. Our local car wash has the rust preventative in the underbody blast. Whether that works or not remains to be seen, but those straps seem to be in working order still.
There's nothing different about that other than it's just
trust me. Like I'm on the amount of money, so I have unlimited a month, and based on the ones that I know, like they're losing money on me. Like, We'll put the call out there. If anybody knows the 100 series Land Cruiser or LX 470, $3,000 to $8,000 range, hit me up.
Yep. Right, Kurt? Sure, you can find one.
I have already emailed Kurt.
Oh, have you?
Well, the glory of the off-road or overland world is like you send someone an email, you cannot always expect a response within a week's time. Like there's a very high likelihood that they're out in the woods for at least a week. So
right, but you'll get a response. It's just it operates people on ye olde mail communication methods.
Yeah, I never really judge anybody when we talk to them, because 100% that's what it is all the time.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Yeah, Kurt was in Iceland or something when we were trying to get him on the show. It's like, wait.
Well, and right now our biggest scheduling issue is King of the Hammers comes up in early February. Yeah. And just about every guest I've talked to recently is like, well, I have a commitment in early February. And I was like, is it King of the Hammers? And they're like, how'd you know? It's like, because the entire industry is headed that way, guys. Like Johnson Valley's going to be full.
Seriously. We got to make it out there at some point.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
goals.
Speaking of making it out there, Dan, welcome back. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You did survive.
You did.
And it's funny, I didn't see that many deadly creatures until I did, and then suddenly I saw like thousands of them.
In one clip, or like
I was like, was that one spider's nest? Like 1,000? Like
seriously.
No. So like Australia full of deadly things, and like it's funny, like it's a caricature, but then sometimes you look around and you're like, oh yeah, like that's a deadly snake. Like they are around. And then when we got up into the north of the country, so kind of like the top third has crocodiles and the big like people eating crocodiles. And you can basically see like dozens of them every day if you want to. Like they are, you cannot go in the water of any variety because the crocodiles will eat you, like 100% guaranteed.
So, okay, 2 follow-up questions to that. So first of all, I think, I don't know if it was you, but I think somebody mentioned that there are crocodiles you can swim with that are not deadly. Freshwater crocodiles, maybe?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So question A part 2 is, how do you not be completely terrified of it being the one, saltwater that made it in there? And 2, what kind of preparation do you do for an excursion and experience like this? So to set the stage for the listeners, Dan recently completed a multi-month excursion.
18 months?
18, was it
18 months? Yeah, 36,000 miles.
So quite a long travel around Australia. And as everybody knows, Australia has, some less than friendly creatures.
What?
So let's start with the second question. How did you, like, we know people that have done, crazy like preparation classes for, dealing with military, dealing with poisonous animals, dealing with that kind of stuff. How did you get yourself set for this?
Yeah, well, Australia is kind of a funny one because it's just one country. And so there's no border crossings, there's no visas, there's no language barriers, there's no changing money, there's no corrupt military. And so it's funny, like, I mean, in theory, there's no...
Every military is a little corrupt.
You just don't have to deal with any of that. So it's kind of strange. Like, Australia is actually like quite an easy place to go and have amazing overland adventures. Like, in real remote desert landscapes, we went 10 days without seeing another person or vehicle.
Oh my
10 days?
10 days?
Yeah, we drove the world's most remote four-wheel drive track, the Canning Stock Route. It was incredible. But you can just like fly to Australia next week, like rent a Land Cruiser and drive that. And it's totally right there. It's actually very, very achievable and very doable. So yeah, you raise a good point. Like, first aid training is essential. And then obviously you really got to think about how much water you bring and how much food, and be self-sufficient, because we covered 1,000 miles in 10 days and there was nobody out there. And we were probably the last people for the year to drive the track. So nobody was coming to help us.
Wow. Do you worry more about fuel or water?
Both, I guess.
Yes. We're about yes.
It's funny when you say that, because during my planning, I was thinking, towards the end, like on day 8 or whatever, if we realize we're running low on water, we can just start rationing it and be really careful and drink a little less and don't even have coffee or anything like that. But if you're running out of fuel, there's nothing you can do. You can't ration it.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So in a funny sense, fuel actually was more of a concern, because if we ran out, that was it. We were hooped.
That's So in terms of the animal thing, it's just like a questionable subject for a lot of people, because a lot of people's reasons to not go exploring is animals. So did you have to do any like preemptive, like psychological training, at least, to say, okay, so if I'm, in this area or vicinity, I can't go this far into the woods or the bush, because there's the potential of this?
No, you don't do any training. You talk to locals. There's enough other people getting around, and I'm not so worried about like sharks and snakes and spiders, because I grew up there and I have a handle on how that works. But I was terrified of the crocodiles because I have zero experience. I think they're evil. I don't like them at all. And so I genuinely, like, every time we met someone who'd been up there, I was like, tell me everything about crocodiles. Can we camp here? Can we do this? Can we, like,
that was your catalyst.
Yeah, I wanted to know everything. And it's funny, yeah, like you were saying, there's the deadly ones, typically called saltwater crocodiles, and they will categorically eat you, and that's it. But then we have these ones called freshwater crocodiles, and they're a little bit more like alligators. They're quite a bit smaller, and they basically never attack people. It's sort of unheard of. And at first, people were telling me, like, oh yeah, you can go swimming with those. It's no problem. And I was like, hell no. No part of that. I'm like, but then it's so bizarre. You're there and it's like 100 degrees every day and humid and dusty, and you've been on the road for months and months and months. And there's this perfect crystal clear swimming hole. And there's a crocodile at the far end of it in the water, and you can see it and you're looking at it, and other people get in the water and go swimming. So then you're like, I mean, it hasn't eaten them yet. I guess I'll just get in a little bit. And then before you know it, that's how you wind up swimming with crocodiles.
You just always make sure one of them is closer to the croc than you are.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. What's the joke? Like, you don't have to be faster than the bear. You just got to be faster than the next fastest person, you know.
And then it leads-
100% what it is.
It leads to these bizarre things where there's a sign, a clear sign that says, warning, there are crocodiles in this water. And it has a picture of a crocodile, with the big sharp teeth, like in the cartoon warning sign. And then directly below it, it says like swimming at your own risk. And there's a picture, like the same cartoon picture of a person swimming. Like,
Yeah.
I don't, okay, I'll go swimming then.
We have that in America at in swimming pools, in like hotels, where it says no lifeguard, swim at your own risk. Not like active crocodiles. That is not a thing that we experience, at least in the northern part of the States.
It's a very strange feeling, and I honestly never believed that I would do it. And then suddenly there I was swimming with crocodiles.
That's yeah. So Chris pulled up a picture of you wading deep in the Gladiator. Have you encountered any wildlife while like actually like actively driving through a river or something?
Oh no, I don't think I ever saw a fish or a crocodile or anything like that. We tried. There's a couple of really famous river crossings up in the Northern Territory where it's extremely common as you're driving across, there will be crocodiles in the water, like you could pretty much reach out and touch them. And we drove across 2 or 3 of them, but we never actually saw any crocodiles. But we spoke to people who were like, oh yeah, when we were there was like 10 crocodiles right in the river.
Oh my God.
That is,
you're like, reasons not to get stuck in the middle of a river crossing. Usually it's like, because you don't want the vehicle to flood, because you don't want to get washed downstream. Now you can just add, because there's many crocodiles in the river.
Oh no.
Oh my gosh.
No, the worst we get up here is like you get a frog in a floorboard, or like maybe a lizard of some sort, but nothing like that.
Yeah.
That's yeah. So yeah, I mean, again, welcome back from Australia. And this really seems like it was a different adventure from the North South Americas and the Africa trip. So I mean, let's talk about Australia. I mean, what were your like high points, low points, the difficulties, and best parts? Tell us everything. I mean, we're all ears here.
I mean, there is so much to talk about. It is, and I'd never seen more than about 10% of the country. So I actually even didn't fully know what I was getting myself into. And it is enormous. It's way bigger than I realized. And it kind of has everything. I think oftentimes you see photos of the deserts, or you see photos of the four-wheel driving Chris was just showing, which is kind of way up in the northeast corner, which was incredible. But as well as that, Australia has like old growth forests down in Tasmania. It has stunning beaches all the way around. It has like rock canyons. It has rainforest. It has mountains that get snow in the winter. So it's kind of amazing. If you travel around the whole country, you really do get to like see all of that, all while you're still in the same country. So it's kind of like traveling in the US. If you go coast to coast and north to south, the diversity is enormous.
Mm-hmm. There's that. Yeah, I think people don't have that scope of knowledge about Australia the same way. Like people think about the US and they think about the coast. They think about, the Southwest with Arizona and the deserts out there, and then the Rockies and Florida. And that's what they think about the US. But people's perception of Australia tends to be just like beaches and desert. How many times have you heard that there's nothing between East and West? That's like the uninformed trope about the country.
Yeah, and that being said, it's kind of true. But it's kind of amazing when you get into the middle of Australia. Like there is nothing. Like the one desert crossing, a different desert crossing we did was 400 or 500 miles over like more than 1,000 sand dunes. And again, we didn't see a person or a vehicle the entire time. And there's like nothing out there for a couple of 1,000 miles in any direction.
Nobody is different than nothing. Changing terrain, changing territory is very different. That is a different thing from what we think of in America as nothing, which is
wheat fields.
Yeah, wheat fields and corn and cows going up in
right. Yeah. Out there,
recently.
There's no buildings of any kind. There's no radio towers. There's no signs of humans other than kind of the track through the sand dunes that someone might have driven in the last month. that's about it. There's no fire. Yeah, there you go. So Chris just brought up that's from the air looking at the Simpson Desert. Those sand dunes stretch for 1,000 miles north to south.
Crazy that is from the air.
Yeah, those are sand dunes, and we drove from east to west, so we had to cross every single one of those. We drove up and over all of those. It was crazy. Yeah.
So what was Chris? Go ahead.
The sand color there reminds me a little bit of Utah, the pink sand dune state park. I think it's called
Great Sands, Great Sands is in Colorado.
No, it's like pink sand dunes, but it is not. It didn't have nearly as much vegetation on it.
Yeah, it's been a really, really rainy couple of years in Australia. They've had like record flooding and houses destroyed, and it's been really bad. But it actually meant the desert crossings we did were really green. There was an enormous amount of vegetation. And I always think of deserts of just being like either sand or rock. But actually, while I was in Australia, there was tons of grass, tons of trees, even flowers a lot of the time we saw. So it was like a really sort of spectacular desert scenery, which is not what I was expecting.
What year was the enormous fire that consumed a large portion, or a relatively large portion? Was that 20 or was that?
That all went down just before COVID happened. So it was all like right at the end of 19 and then just into the first month of 20, I think. So they'd only just got the fires kind of all out and everyone was happy. And then COVID kicked off, I think, in March of 20, didn't it?
Yeah. End of January was when the first stuff started happening. Okay. So there was enough time to have vegetation like regrow a little bit before you got out there.
Yeah, and we did drive through a region it was actually one of the worst places where people ended up like in a whole town, they evacuated onto the beach because everything burnt. And then they actually went out into the water and they were just stranded in the water because otherwise they would have died. And so we drove through that region, and it's incredible to see all of these massive trees just completely black, just nothing.
Yeah.
And then the odd green shoot here and there, like starting to come back.
Yeah. To a much lesser extent, we've seen the same thing, like driving through portions of Florida, like the trees are leveled at a certain point. There's nothing in any, side of your view. And it's like, oh yeah, there was a hurricane here, 2 years ago. Oh, this is nature. Nature does what nature wants.
Dude, these fire photos are nuts. Sorry.
Yeah, it's gnarly. I was watching a documentary about it recently. I was researching something and ended up looking. I was looking at videos of campfire in California and ended up doing, going through stuff in the fires in Australia. It's pretty terrifying. The climate change aspect is of how we all interact with the environment is certainly, it's January 25th and I'm sitting in a glass-ish room and it's pouring rain, not snowing.
Which is the same system that just dropped snow on me the day before.
Yep.
Have I told my forest fire like evacuation plan stories on here before when I worked at that summer camp?
No.
So I worked at a summer camp in Estes, Colorado for a couple of summers, and the second summer was the summer of the Hayman fire, which was the fairly big wildfire kind of west of Denver there. We had 2 evacuation plans. Plan 1 was if we had to get all the kids out of camp because it was time to evacuate, we would load them in the vans, and then every counselor's car would take as many children as possible. And it wasn't about as many seatbelts, it was as many. And like I had a pickup truck.
Clown car status.
Yeah, like I was going to fill the bed with like kids basically to get out of there. That was evac plan 1. Evac plan 2 is if we couldn't drive out, we were supposed to get all the kids to the football field because it was the flattest place. They were all supposed to bring their sleeping bags, and then we would turn on the sprinkler system to douse their sleeping bags and then wait for a helicopter to come fly us all out. Fortunately, we didn't have to run either of those plans, but just knowing that they existed was a little terrifying for about a week and a half. Like it didn't just like come up and go away. It would be like, oh, there's new smoke over there today. Like just, yeah.
It's
wildfires
crazy.
are scary.
Dan, did you run into any extreme circumstances whatsoever on this? Any
He's in Australia. Isn't
Stay
it
away
all
f-
extreme circumstances?
you know what I mean? Like, I mean, fire is obviously not as prevalent right now, but
Yeah,
anything
we
where
didn't. There weren't any fires, I don't think, while I was there, but flooding was a huge, huge thing. Kind of the whole East Coast and houses were getting washed away, and it was terrible. And we crossed the Simpson Desert like 7, 8 days out there, didn't see a person, and you pop out in this little town called Birdsville, right on the edge of the desert, and it's known as being this like ridiculously remote, quirky place. And so finally, we get a hot shower, we go to the pub and have a beer, and we're like, this is great. Camp in the campground and kind of stumble out of bed at like 9 o'clock in the morning, and the police are right next to our campsite. And I'm like, oh, what have we done? And the cop's like, if you want to get out of here, you have to go right now. And I'm like,
Oh.
what are you talking about? And he's like, the floodwater's coming, man. The town's already cut off. We're going to have to give you an escort out of town through the floodwater. He's like, the river's coming up like a foot every 10 minutes. He's
Holy
like,
cow.
go now
kind
or you
of-
won't get out.
what elevation is this, or is it just totally proximity to river that is?
Yeah, I think Birdsville is almost no elevation. And it's such a weird one because of where it is. When it rains further north, they just know, they just can predict it like 2-3 weeks ahead of time. Be like, oh yeah, it's going to flood. We know it. The water's coming. It'll just take that long to get here. And it happens like every 5 or 10 years where they just
Oh
get
my God.
totally cut off. And so yeah, we got a police escort out of town and then had to detour like, I don't know, 1,000 miles, 2,000 miles out of our
Oh
way
my God.
because all the roads were cut and everything was closed and there was emergency workers everywhere, and just to be able to get out so we could sort of keep going.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
You couldn't just say like, I'm fine. I have a Jeep. It's fine.
No, there's too much water.
yeah. That's
Yeah, there you go. That's exactly what it looks like where we were essentially, because it's all desert and the ground is so flat. You only need a foot of water, and it looks like that for the next 100 kilometers.
Yeah. And people don't realize that desert, like the assumption is that in a totally dry circumstance, if you pour water on it, that it just goes down. But if it's extreme dry, you pour water on it, the water just sits. It doesn't absorb the same way.
And I had never even experienced it to that degree before either. And seeing it with my own eyes, I was dumbfounded. I was like, wow, the water just pools. And it takes weeks. It doesn't go anywhere. It's crazy.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's circle back. How was the Gladiator over your little excursion here? And tell us about Gladiator versus Wrangler. I mean, given different generations of Jeep, but
Yeah. So I flew over there and I bought a Gladiator in Australia. So it was a right-hand drive Australian spec. And I kind of had to do that because I'm a citizen of Australia, so I can't import a foreign vehicle. And I sort of did it too because nobody's really gone traveling in Australia with the Gladiator yet. They get no respect in Australia. Basically, Jeep over there has a very bad reputation. And
Toyota and Nissan, right?
Toyota.
If you off-road, it's Toyota and Nissan.
Yeah. And so I wanted to see if a Gladiator, would handle the conditions and is appropriate for Australia. And I tried really hard to keep it light. That was really my main goal when I built it. So it just has a canvas canopy on the back. And we slept in that thing on the ground there in that photo. That's called a swag. And so that's a real classic Australian kind of bushman thing to do. It's sort of like a ground sleeping bag / tent made out of canvas.
Yeah. It's where tent and sleeping bag overlap.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was sort of a pretty simple, lightweight setup. And it went really well. We drove everything that I've ever dreamed of driving in Australia, from the really difficult 4-wheel driving tracks up in Cape York in the north to the huge desert crossings, including the biggest one in the world. That's one of the river crossings that sometimes has crocodiles. Across sand dunes, beaches, kind of just everything, mud, tons of deep water crossings, probably more than even I bargained for. And the Gladiator was great. It did everything with ease, I'm going to say. And it was actually really funny to see the reaction of Australians, because they're driving their Land Cruiser troop carriers, or they're driving their Nissans or whatever. They've just never seen what a Jeep is capable of. Like the amount of flex that a Jeep can get. And I would just crawl up something in first gear, low range with the Rubicon where they're having to like dump the clutch and get a whole bunch of wheel spin and get wheel lift and rev the engine really hard. I would walk up something and they'd be like, that didn't even look difficult at all. You made that look so easy. Right. Yeah. So it was really fun to compare it to other Australian four-wheel drives.
So was yours gas or diesel?
That is gas. You can only get gas in Australia, and you can only get it in an automatic, the Gladiator.
So the crawl ratio is like 96-ish to, it's like 96 to 97 to 1 or so.
That sounds right.
And front and rear locked, and you have the disconnectable sway bars.
Exactly. Yep.
Rubicon. Okay, so that is a competent package.
Yes.
And I mean, I'm not the one to talk because I've watched the videos, but tell the audience what you did to the Gladiator in terms of upgrades, modifications, and whatnot prior to a trip like this, because most people would say, oh, you have to do 100 different things, and keep it light is a great mojo.
I knew from the very beginning the goal was to get as remote as possible, and Australia has, big remote. So first thing I added was an additional gas tank. So total capacity was, I want to say 40 gallons.
Pretty good.
So straight away, a range of, I'm trying to do the conversions in my head, a range of 600 miles just off the stock tanks.
Yep.
I added a big water tank with a pump and a filter, a big fridge, a kitchen, solar panel, auxiliary battery, and then storage for all the food and all the gear. That was really my main focus of the build.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of capability, I didn't want to touch the driveline at all. I learned,
Stock
in Africa, I didn't need to touch the driveline, so why would I, compromise reliability? So 33-inch all-terrain tires, AEV 2.5-inch suspension lift, more than anything because I wanted to carry the weight. And getting it up that little bit did help with the breakover angle as well. Before I lifted it, I definitely did scrape the belly a few times. And then after, it held me up a couple of times. And then
Gladiators really benefit from like a slight suspension lift and like a 1 to 2 upsize on the tire.
Yeah. I feel like it made a big difference for me. And then I put a Warden winch on the front, AEV front bumper, a snorkel, which turned out to be absolutely essential. A roof rack for the first time ever. I've never had one before, but I really wanted to have an awning this time so I could have, good shelter from the weather.
Couldn't have really had one on the Africa Jeep because it would have tilted all the roof rack equipment at a 45-degree angle.
Yeah, and you can actually, if I wanted to, I could have put a roof rack on the Ursa Minor pop-up roof on that Jeep. But they do say you can only put light things up there, especially when you open the roof.
Your swag.
Well,
you're not putting a spare up there.
No, or no fuel up there, that's for sure.
Oh,
which I ended up doing in Australia as well. I put fuel on the roof for the first time, which is definitely not my preference, but I just needed to carry so much of it. I actually carried 250 liters of fuel, which I think is about 80 gallons. So I was carrying a lot of fuel to do those desert crossings.
It is, according to Google, at least 66 gallons. Which
66 gallons of
considering
of gas.
Most people carry 1 5-gallon like Rotopack, or jerry can, like that is a shit ton of extra fuel.
Yeah, so I had the stock 22-gallon tank. I had the 20-gallon tank. I had 2 5-gallon jerrys in the back of the Gladiator, and I had 3 5-gallon jerrys on the roof.
That's
good,
crazy.
Lord.
Yeah.
And for the big desert crossing, for the 1,000-mile desert crossing, I drove all of that, and at about the halfway point, there's one Aboriginal community, and they have one fuel pump, and so I filled up. It was about $9 a gallon, I think, for gas.
Oh man!
Refilled all of it again, and then kept going, and then so that's how much fuel I needed, because driving in the deep sand, in the heat and everything, the Jeep was getting, I think, about 12 miles a gallon on those desert crossings.
That's really not that bad, though. I mean, considering most people in 4 low are doing 5 to 8.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I just can't own or drive a vehicle that will get mileage like that bad, because I just have to carry more fuel than is even remotely possible.
Land Cruiser.
Exactly, yeah. 100 series with a V8.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
not
so-
going to be that
Oh
remote.
man, daggers. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a big balancing act of being able to get. I mean, that is the most remote I've ever been in my life. Way more remote than I got in Africa, and
Remote
that
than
was the
mine for
goal.
me.
And I'm super happy that we were able to do it.
Let's talk tires because I am a super hardcore tire nerd, and I've run everything from extreme mud terrains to dedicated street tires, and in some cases 180 treadwear race tires. So you've been, correct me if I'm wrong, you've been working with Yokohama
That's correct.
prior to Australia,
Yes,
and you've never had an issue. No flats.
that's correct. Not a single flat,
Okay.
not a single problem. These are Yokohama XATs, so they're like aggressive all-terrains that I guess they blur the line between all-terrain and mud-terrain.
Crossover all-terrain
Yep.
is
Yep.
what they call.
And they've been brilliant for me. And it was really interesting to see. I didn't meet a single other four-wheel drive going around Australia that hadn't had tire problems, either complete failures or multiple punctures. And I drove a couple of the roads, like the Gibb River Road is just, everyone swears you have to have two spare tires because you categorically will destroy a tire on that road. The
like
road
the
is
Dalton or the Dempster. Everybody says the same
exactly.
thing. And...
The road is simply that bad that you will destroy a tire. And I never had a single problem. Yeah.
Any idea how much the Gladiator weighed with everything on it?
Yep, I put it on the scale. It was right on its GBWM. So in Australia, they're not rated. It had a 3,050 kilogram total vehicle weight. We could do pounds times 2.25, 6,600 and 6,700 maybe.
6724. Okay, so
there you go. Thanks, Google.
Yes, thank you, Google. Again, I do this more often than I would ever care to admit. So what load rating were you?
Those are E load rated tires.
They were E. Okay, how loaded? Like for a long trek, were you running at like normal? Like, I guess normal PSI for you is probably like in the 40-ish range, and even you're probably 18s.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. On the Gibb River Road and things like that, I usually went to about 20 or 22, depending on kind of what speed I was going to be traveling. And for crazy stuff like that photo, I went down to 16 or 18. And in really deep sand, awesome. I went down to 12 once or twice in like very soft beach sand.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, E load. I mean, the E is a huge difference between like a normal P rated or even a C that a lot of off-roaders completely neglect, because it's not just how much weight is carried down it, on a normal like paved section of path, but also how much force comes down on it in instances like the picture that Chris just showed.
Yeah, and I feel like having the E load rating, it's kind of just a bit of insurance that the sidewalls are a bit tougher and that the thing is going to handle a bit more abuse. And I think that's been proven that they were up to the challenge.
So knowing that
I finally found Gibb, sorry.
was that one of the road train?
It was a road train, yeah.
Okay.
They're what was it, 93 meters long or something? So
good Lord.
Yeah, it's an 18-wheeler, but it has 5 or 6 trailers on it.
We don't do that here.
No, in Australia, Australia only does it in like some regions. Lots of Australia, they're illegal, but there are the very remote parts that it's kind of the only way that goods are transported.
So last tire question, because this is where my nerdiness peaks. Why all-terrain or crossover all-terrain and not dedicated mud terrain at this point?
What I've found on my expeditions and going around the world is that you do wind up spending a good portion of the trip on pavement, even when you try not to. It'd probably be impossible to do less than 20 or 30% of your time on pavement. Even when you're off-road, maybe 40 or 50% of the time it's on good gravel anyway. And so I find it's really only, let's say, 20% of the time, I would say you're even thinking about using low range. You're even really, four-wheel driving. And so for me, it's a big compromise where I don't want a dedicated rock crawler on 40-inch mud terrains. I kind of want a long-distance travel vehicle, that is suitable for all terrain. And all-terrain tires have worked really well for me.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've actually, a couple of people I've met going around Africa with mud terrains and a couple in Australia as well, they just get torn up so much faster, I find. They chunk from the gravel. They don't last nearly as long. I feel like mud terrains just aren't as durable, and they don't handle, like tens and tens and thousands of miles of kind of rough terrain.
For me, it's more, if you acknowledge the way that you will use a vehicle and are okay with that, then the on-pavement characteristics are worth having to drive some obstacles differently or avoid some obstacles if you're on an AT versus an MT. And yeah, it's the same thing. It's, everything is a compromise in the off-road world. The same way, you're sleeping in a swag versus like an alley cab or something, like a GFC.
Yeah, exactly.
But
yeah, I agree with that about tires 100%. And I think it was really interesting to see when the Gladiator, there was 2 or 3 times I had to use the winch because the Gladiator just couldn't climb the obstacle. And every one of those, the belly was actually scraping. And, if I had 37-inch tires, chances are it would have driven it, but they're illegal in Australia, and that's a whole different story.
What?
So would mud terrains have made the difference? It's hard to say, maybe. But then it's a funny thing of like, okay, so I had mud terrains and I drove the obstacles. So then it's like, why did I even have a winch? It all, I feel like it all starts to like, there's so many different aspects to consider and so many pros and cons.
Yeah. There's a breaking point in where the net positive, net negative, like enjoyment of things all comes into play.
Exactly. Yeah. And cost is a huge factor for me as well. Like
that too.
Paying for this trip, it was a huge amount of money for me. And did I want to just spend more and more money on the vehicle? I would have had to have different wheels and re-gear the axles, and bigger tires are more expensive and would have used a lot more fuel turning bigger, heavier tires.
The difference between 15 and 10 miles per gallon doesn't sound like a ton because you're still talking, terrible fuel economy compared to what most passenger vehicles get. But that's 15 to 10 is a huge difference in fuel when you're covering the mileage that you do.
That's right. I drove almost 40,000 miles, and gas in Australia is not cheap. Like probably the cheapest I ever paid over there was like $6 a gallon US.
Good Lord.
So that was cheap. Like often it was $7 or $8 a gallon.
That's like living in California.
Yeah. So it's, that is a big, big expense. And so my goal, anything I can do to preserve fuel economy, I want to think about that and focus on that.
All right. So hit us with your 3 absolute favorite parts, places, sections of your Australia escapade.
Had to be a wallaby.
Good. Yeah. Good. Good luck narrowing this down.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, so you've probably heard of the old telegraph track up in Cape York in the far northeast corner of Australia. I think it's Australia's most famous four-wheel drive track, and it was beyond my wildest expectations, kind of in more ways than I even realized. The four-wheel drive is incredible. It's difficult. The scenery is beautiful. The people that you meet, the swimming, there's crystal clear swimming holes, these amazing waterfalls.
Oh my gosh. Sorry.
Yeah, we drove down that.
Is that Gunshot?
Yeah. That's Gunshot. There it is. That's me driving Gunshot.
Yeah. Is it as bad as it is made out to be?
Yes and no. It depends a lot on the year because the erosion changes a lot of things. The original Gunshot is you can't even get to it anymore because of erosion. So we're driving that thing we drove is kind of 10 feet to the left of it.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, as long as you have a good spotter and they line you up, all you have to do is hold your foot on the brake as hard as you can and you just go down in a straight line. doesn't actually require any skill of any kind.
So
And you just have to be dumb enough to do it. And then you get to the bottom and you're like, oh, that wasn't even hard.
That's how most good stories start, though. So
and then interestingly, there's a couple of chicken tracks where you can drive around it. Everyone we met that did those, though, they got panel damage because they have they look like that, but they have corners in them. And so as you go around the corner, the vehicle tips and hits the bank.
Oh, no.
So yeah,
Okay.
gunshot, getting in, that's the easy part. Getting out, the Land Cruiser was like lifting tires and we had to run a winch, and it was kind of technical. Whereas going in, it isn't technical at all, really.
it's
this
smart.
Is this the exit?
That is, I think that might be gunshot. Yeah, that could be gunshot.
That looks fun.
Yeah, and that troopy weighs like 4.5 tons, so it weighs like
That
10
looks
tons.
gnarly.
That thing looks like it's a lot of weight up top.
It does, yeah. And we you could just lean on it and you could feel like it was going to go over.
Oh,
We're like,
Yeah,
whoa.
like
Yeah.
I feel like I need a guy pulling a Sean Holman, pulling a rig down here from the front, like we've seen with him that Road Overland picture.
Yeah, and we all jumped on the front of that thing many times.
Yeah. Okay. So
He had a lot of handlebars, so you're good.
That's right.
yes, seriously. So Teletrack was one of the highlights. What else? Tell us more.
Track was a highlight for sure. The Canning stock route, so that is the one. It's 1,000 miles, the most remote 4-wheel drive track in the world. Sand dunes. We saw wild camels every day.
Camels.
Yeah. Oh, cows.
It surpassed my expectations just in terms of the kind of the heaviness or the seriousness of the whole thing. Because really, every day you just get in and drive. It's not difficult in commas, but as the days go on and you're like, holy crap, we are really, really far from the world right now. Like,
for you to say that, it must really be something.
Other than the satellite beacon that we have in our little grab emergency bag, if the Jeep bursts into flame, we have to get that bag out of the vehicle or we will die. There is absolutely no possible other alternative than we will die. It is not possible that we can get ourselves out of here on our own.
So interesting that you have an actual go bag in your go vehicle, because most people have that in their house, for like shit hitting the fan.
Yeah. And of course, carrying 67 gallons of gasoline
on top.
Fair point.
If it catches on,
okay.
I mean, I had my fire extinguisher, but I kind of knew that it was inadequate.
That's a good point.
Okay. Real fast on fire extinguishers, is it like a pressurized fire extinguisher, or do you have one of those element stick things?
No, I just had a pressurized one, just kind of old school. Yeah.
There's part of me that wants to throw those element things in every vehicle just because they seem so simple and lightweight.
They do seem amazing.
One-use thing.
They seem amazing. Maybe I'll get one next time and see how it goes.
Yeah. Who did we've had, was that Adam Shallow that was talking those up and down?
I don't know.
Somebody who's been.
I love watching the videos of people grabbing them and saving vintage cars or whatever all the time because they're a non-toxic, non-corrosive substance.
Yeah.
And so if you've got a vintage vehicle, that's the one to use it in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you keep that in mind for your, next.
What's up, Element? Send me some fire extinguishers.
I just bought
they're not cheap, so that's why
literally like 2 weeks ago bought one of those, like, not pocket size but small kitty fire extinguishers with the racket that you can bolt onto the side of like the D pillar. So
yeah,
that's part of my upcoming weekend project should the weather cooperate. But okay, so what else? Any other, like, when you sit back on a normal night and think about it, like the absolute best parts of your whole trip?
It's funny to say, but Australia actually has some incredible swimming holes. And so you're out in the middle of the desert, you've been out there for 7 days, and you come across like a legitimate hot spring. And I didn't know Australia has like legit, it's hot water and it's in the middle of nowhere. And there was one that was like as big as a lake. And they're hard to find and they're few and far between. But when you find them, it feels like a real reward.
Have you done any digging into the digging into the geology behind that?
Yeah. And I didn't know, but I guess Australia has what they call the Great Artisanal Basin. Under, let's say, 2/3 of the continent, there is a massive amount of fresh water. and it's been down there for like 3 million years. And it's so deep that it just gets hot, and then it comes out of the earth in certain places.
Right.
Yeah,
the
and
heat and pressure has to evacuate itself up in
exactly.
some way.
Yeah. And in places you even get those cool formations that hot springs always leave. You know, where they're putting all the calcium deposits, and you kind of get those mounds and all the kind of funky colors. And but also, so hot springs I loved, but also there's a lot of like fresh water swimming holes as well. Yeah, and the radioactive one, that's pretty fun.
The hazmat, the radioactive hazmat logo.
So that is actually
so
the only hot spring in the world that is heated by the decay of uranium. So legitimately, that is heated by nuclear decay. Yeah, it's the only one in the whole world.
Yeah, nothing daunting about that.
No, lots of warning signs, lots of do not swim, lots of do not hang around for too long, because the gas bubbling out of it is actually toxic as well.
Yes, if you continue to breathe this in, there will be a problem.
Yep.
All right, we are crunching on time, so let's do hardest 4x4 sections of your entire Australia adventure.
Oh, the old Telly track by far is number one. And then there's a couple of tracks near there. One's called the Krebs track. One's called Frenchman's track. They both have some like really intense obstacles. That the one river crossing we looked at for maybe 3 or 4 hours. We would not like happy to do it, but we did in the end, and it was great.
You looked at it for 3 or 4 hours?
Oh yeah, and like walked it and swam it and moved rocked around and like talked about it, and usually we ended up like winching all the vehicles together and going one at a time and multiple spotters, and it was a thing.
That's a different kind of off-roading, like at least in the ATV UTV community, which is what I've done 50% of my off-roading in, is 3 to 4 minutes of looking at something and not trying it is something is really wrong.
Yeah.
Oh man, what about Fraser Island? That's like when we were talking to Joel. Joel Strickland is one of our favorite guests, best friends of the show. He's Australian. I don't know, Dan, if you know him, but Joel's the best.
He's an automotive photographer out of Melbourne.
Okay, cool.
And he was the first one that told us about Fraser Island. He was like, yeah, people really fuck up over there. So you seem to have not fucked up, but you didn't have any like of the crazy YouTube moments that the place is famous for.
Yeah, no, we spent 10 days there. We saw some of the carnage. We saw other people that fucked up. But I think Fraser Island's a really funny one, because you get a lot of people there who either think they know what they're doing and they don't, or they just clearly don't know what they're doing and they know they don't. Like, we met people who were driving around on the softest beach sand I've ever seen at 35 PSI. And when we told them they needed to lower their tire pressures, they would say, yeah, we did. We went down from 40. We're good. We lowered our pressures. Yeah. And so they're the people who get stuck. They're the people who then the waves inundate their car and, it gets destroyed. And they're just wheel spinning all day long on soft beach sand. Whereas I drove onto the island, went down to, I think, 16 PSI, and I don't think I ever even spun a wheel, even like on the hardest four-wheel drive obstacle on Fraser Island. I just walked, like, didn't even spin a tire.
Is that the hill thing that goes like up through and then back down?
Exactly that. Yeah, it's called Ngala Rocks, and it's a pretty decent climb up really soft sand, and sort of in both directions. So when you go out, you have to climb it, and then on the way back, it's a big climb as well. And I've seen YouTube videos where guys are hitting that at full throttle, fourth gear, like full send, smashing into their bump stops. Massive carnage, breaking everything. And I crawled up it in second gear without spinning a tire because I just had low tire pressures. So I think,
funny how that works.
Island's one of those funny ones where you can get some really good YouTube footage if you want. Oh my God, we went full throttle. It was crazy. Or you can just use your brain and kind of drive.
Do what's appropriate.
Yeah. So
drive the way it's supposed
when those Fraser Island videos are recommended to me on YouTube, I click through, you get to Ngala Rocks, and they are just full send carnage. And I'm like, that's utterly unnecessary. But
yeah. Know how that goes.
You have to go to Fraser though. It is stunningly beautiful. Like, my jaw fell open when I drove to the northern tip. There's a big sand dune right beside you, and you kind of drive between the sand dune and the ocean, and I was like, oh my God, it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my whole life.
That's like northeast-ish corner of Australia.
Yes. Yeah. Just sort of
Okay.
off Brisbane. So yeah, eastern coast.
Okay, noted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do
Very,
you-
very
yeah.
achievable. You could fly into Brisbane, rent a 4-wheel drive, and spend an incredible week on Fraser Island. Like unforgettable.
So long as you don't.
Sorry, I've found the
beat
images
yourself.
of the rocks. Oh my gosh, come on, they're all not appropriate.
Yeah, dude, I remember the show with Joel when he told us about this, and we like there was radio silence when we were looking at pictures of how stupid people are. But
Oh,
I
it's
don't know
crazy.
why. I don't know why we're surprised. I mean,
Yeah. So yeah,
it's
Fraser Island was definitely a highlight. I mean, there were a lot of highlights. There were a lot of places that I've always wanted to go to, and finally getting there and being like, oh my God, this is incredible.
Just the line of
Oh.
4x4s in the background of this. As
Can
people are
you-
like, how do we do this?
you punch in on that so we can like at least criticize the line, like the vehicular incompetence going on. I mean, the first one that looks like an 80.
Which
Yeah, there'll
one?
be lots of 80s and 100s. There'll be like Isuzu D-Maxes in there.
Yeah. The
be-
trailers are what always get me. I'm like, ha.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't have D-Maxes here. We have Colorados
No.
and Canyons, which are kind of the same thing, but
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, lots of
generally-
Ford Rangers are really popular over there now. They come in a diesel. Prado is extremely popular. And then the
Prado.
200 series Land Cruiser, because it comes with the 4.5-liter turbo diesel V8. So it's
Hmm.
extremely popular.
Sad. Not what
Yeah.
mine has.
Well, the other Prado we know launched an alternator tonight. Is on a
Yeah,
tow truck right now.
literally the conversation a half hour or an hour and a half ago was yes, I'm so glad I own an
Oh, I
old.
may have
Yeah.
found a photo of that.
Yikes.
Sorry, Camille.
Yeah.
But
well, it's
It
probably-
definitely was interesting in Australia. I think I saw more 70 series Land Cruisers than every other kind of vehicle put together.
What?
Yeah.
And it was so crazy, actually. We did a fair bit of 4-wheel driving with some guys in, the troop carriers, and they have them all outfitted. They didn't know each other, and their Land Cruisers were so identical, they actually struggled to know which vehicle was theirs. They would go to get in
What?
and get in the
Ugh.
wrong one, because you have the roof rack, the front bumper, the tires, the wheels,
Snorkel,
the suspension.
yeah.
And when I say I mean like there's only one brand that you would even consider.
Yep.
And they only come in
Yep.
2 or 3 colors anyway from the factory.
Tan,
and so-
gray, black, white.
It's tan, white, and there's a dark blue color, and I've only ever seen like 3 of them. So tan and white are the only 2 colors. And I'd say
This is-
95% of them are tan.
Barn.
Did you
And-
remind them that they have number plates?
Yeah, I guess you could do that. But it was
Wait.
it was really strange to see. You end up with this like follow the leader procession of like $150,000 Land Cruiser followed by $150,000
Oh
ding ding.
my
They're
God.
identical in every possible aspect, and they're all just one at a time driving the obstacle. Just
Did you happen upon a single other Gladiator in your travels?
I happened upon one in the Victorian High Country. Yep, a guy was
One.
driving one of the harder tracks, and he was loving it. And on the road one time up in Queensland on the highway, I passed one going the other direction, and he'd had like a rooftop tent and a
Did
rack.
you do the Jeep wave?
Oh,
Did you give
definitely
him-
did the
did
Jeep.
you
Oh,
give
yeah.
him the wave.
We did a big Jeep wave. Yeah.
Oh boy. All right. Are you
yeah.
are you planning any adventures for Western Canada?
I am. I've got lots of adventure plans in the works. I'm building a new vehicle. I'm gearing up towards another international trip to a whole new part of the world. But all of that isn't quite public yet. I'm kind of one of those people. I'm a bit reticent to talk about what I'm going to do, just in case plans change, or just in case I can't deliver on what I said.
In case
I-
COVID-20 happens.
Exactly. So I'd much rather just
Uh.
sort of be the kind of person who does it. And then
Mm.
like, instead of saying, this is what I'm going to do, I'm more like, this is what I do.
So, but you've done like Alaska prior in the TJ, so you're not looking at, the month of March saying, okay, I have to leave where I am and I have to go, drive 800 miles west.
I mean,
th-
I
this is
I used to live in the Yukon right next to Alaska, and I miss it a lot. So I do want to get back up there for sure. And I kind of have this idea of driving up there like in the dead of winter, go all the way to the Arctic Ocean when it's like minus 45. Just for fun.
Jump in. Yeah.
Just for a challenge.
Have you
Yep.
have you heard of the Alcan Rally?
I have, and the Alcan Rally is interesting because they do it right at the end of February. And actually, the end of February is like the most beautiful time in the world up there. The days are really long. It's actually warm by Arctic standards. It's only like -20 or -30 or something. And so it's actually, I've been up there a couple of times at that time of year, and you can drive on the Arctic Ocean, and like it's pleasant. It's actually like beautiful. Whereas me being me, I kind of feel like going up there like end of December when the sun won't come up at all.
When it's miserable.
It will be pitch black for like a month or two.
Mhm.
So yeah, it could be interesting times.
I love it.
Crazy. So as we brush up on the end of the show, the tease for the next adventure, the next vehicle and whatnot, can we expect any preemptive talk about this? Like, you're still writing for Overland Journal, right? Is that
That's right.
That's still going on? Okay.
Yep.
We have many of friends of the show who we hope to see at our potential Expo East.
It's like every third episode is somebody from Overland
Oh
Journal.
my god, yeah. Richard and Ashley, to name, two of them. Like, it's
Yeah,
Still
we're all
haven't
big
gotten Graham nailed down. I need to nail down Graham.
Yeah, Graham's a hard guy to pin down, I think.
Yeah.
And Scott too.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah. I actually have still never met Graham in real life, although we've probably exchanged like 300 emails at this point.
I shook his hand at Expo West, so he is
Yep.
real.
He's a real
he does
person.
exist. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, there is some things on the horizon. I'm just working now on, I will probably be at Overland Expo West with the new vehicle is the plan. Northwest Overland Rally, BC Overland Rally, Overland Expo Pacific Northwest, and then SEMA at the end of this year. I think I'll be at all of those with the new vehicle. That is the current plan that I'm working on. I just have a lot of things to figure out between now and then.
SEMA, so 42-inch tires and 29-inch wheels. Sorry, I
better go bigger, I think, and like maybe 2 superchargers. I was thinking.
See,
yeah.
I'm just putting this out there. I'm not trying to, you don't have to acknowledge any of this. I think you'll go smaller and rear wheel drive only. Like, you've done all the very capable 4x4 stuff. I see you in a rear wheel drive only, just having some fun sliding around now.
325, 1988, black, an 80 series bumper, ARB mocked up. Yeah. Front springs from a D130.
Yeah. If I was going to do it, I would probably just get like a Mercedes station wagon with like an OM617 in it that already has like 1 million miles on it.
Yeah.
No, wouldn't even do anything to it and just drive it around the world.
Well,
maybe some spacers.
We know what one is with a Hemi in it, but it doesn't run. So.
Well, maybe I'll just push it everywhere.
Yeah.
Does it still have the Hemi in it? Sorry, Jeff, we need to reschedule.
Actually, no. The last was that the Hemi was coming out and there was an LS going in, but
I
don't think there was any confirmation that there had been any progress from A to B. So not a problem.
Yeah, I'm gonna wrap up the show real fast. So you can rate and review us wherever you listen to a podcast. I normally say iTunes. I'm not going to this time because iTunes doesn't exist anymore.
Apple
you can
Podcasts.
you can like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow Dan. He's at The Road Chose Me everywhere.
That's right.
His own website, the YouTube channel, the Instagram. Are you on Twitter?
I am on Twitter, but I rarely use it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't normally see you on there.
And I will say, go back and read Dan's old written stories with pictures from way back when.
They're good stories.
They are.
You can follow Hooniverse, the Hooniverse on Twitter, the real Hooniverse on Instagram. Ross is not like the one from Friends, and I'm at Overland and Dan. And we did it. We did a show. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. That was fun.
Thanks, Dan. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. If you end up going to Mountain West, maybe I'll try and pull that in. But I think I drove to Flagstaff last spring, and I don't know that I want to do that again.
And that's how I feel about Mountain West. It's a pretty long drive for me, and I don't know. I don't need to do that many miles again.
Yeah,
just skip it and come to Expo East.
Well, it's even farther.
But if you're gonna do a trip, at least do a trip. Yeah.
and then there's Toledo Jeep Fest, and then
There's
Toledo Jeep Fest.
no, it was good. It was really good in 2019.
Was it?
I loved it. Oh, it's excellent.
Really?
Yeah, really fun. Really, like, I mean, Jeep people are crazy, and it's just fun to be around them.